Okay, now it's working. Okay, Atasa. Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara. We are up to the Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, but we should probably go back a little bit so that we could get back into the Shaila. So we had a Shaila from Rami Bar Chama, and the Shaila was if someone is matvis b'davar Assur and b'davar Assur and muter, meaning it was once a davar Assur, so you had a piece of meat that is basar shlomim. It was once upon a time Assur, but this meat is already post zrika. So therefore, this meat is now muter to be eaten. And the question was when you are matvis in it and you say, I want this my kikar to be like this piece of meat. Do I mean like the origin of this piece of meat, which is Assur, or do I want it to be like its current state, which is heter? So we said lema kitanoi. The Gemara wanted to suggest that this question is actually dependent on a machloikis tonight, because someone said harei alai kibachar. This kikar should be assur to me like a bechor. Now, the first question that jumps out at us is that a bechor becomes kaddish by itself. So who's being makdash? Why is that a davar another? So at the end of the sugya, the Gemara is going to tell us that bechor you have to declare as a bechor. And the question is what that does, and we'll get into it later. But a bechor definitely has to be declared as a bechor, so it could be considered as a davar another. So someone said, "Arei like a bechor." Rabbi Yaakov Oyser, Rabbi Yaakov said that's a valid neder. Rabbi Yehuda mater, and Rabbi Yehuda's mater. So let's drill down into what precisely the case is. If when I say bechor, I mean a bechor which is before the zrika, before the zrika's dam. The Ran says even if I don't specify, if someone just says the word bechor, the pashut is he means b'fnei zrika's dam. The Ran proves it from a Mishnah that we're going to learn soon. Well, then my time of demand is shari. You're literally comparing it to a regular carbon. And if you're saying, I want this kikar to be like a bechor la'achas rikas damim, where it's perfectly mutter to be eaten, so there is no Assur here. I'm saying I want my kikar to be like this piece of meat that's mutter to eat. So my time demand Assur. Why would you say that that's an eder? Elolav, in order that there can be a subject matter where there could possibly be two opinions about, we need to find a case where there would be at least a little bit of controversy so that we could discuss a machlekes tanayim about. And it must be this very case where we do have a question about. The machis basar bechar, there's basar bechar sitting here. And I'm going to learn like the Rishonim who hold that there's a piece of bechar sitting here that's after the zrika, so it's mutter to be eaten. Umachis basar teheich gabei. And there's another piece of meat sitting side by side. And you declare that this piece of meat of heter should be like this piece of meat, which is basar bechar. And we have a machalekas tanoim as to whether or not that's a valid neder. Utanai. So let's say that the machalekas tanoim is exactly the shayla that Rami B'cham asked. When I say this piece of meat should be kazel like this piece of bechar, do I mean the source of this meat, meaning the Assur carbon of bechar, and therefore I'm assuring my piece of meat, or am I comparing it to the meat in its current state, which is heter? And then, of course, there's no Assur to draw from it. And maybe that's the machlokes tonight. No, loy the chula alma lefnei zrikas damim. Everybody might hold that when you're pointing to this piece of meat, the Assur, you're referring to the source of the piece of meat, and you're referring to the Assur. So my timer demand shari. So who holds this would not be a valid neder? And if we look back, it was Rabbi Yehuda who said that it's mutter. Amar kra kiyidar. The pasuk says the ish kiyidar neder, and we learn achi yidar b'davar hanader. We learned that when you're being matvis, meaning you're comparing what you want to assur to something that's assur already, when you're making this atpasa, the item that you're comparing it to, which already has Assur, cannot be an Assur that the Torah put on it. Rather, it has to be an Assur that you placed on it. So I want to put an Assur on Chayfetz B, just like the Assur that exists on Chayfetz A that was also placed by a human, and it's not an Assur like Chazer. Lafuki Bechar, which excludes Bechar, the Davar Assur. So you see, similar to what Duvi said, that there's going to be a dispute of whether or not Bechar is considered a Davar another or a Davar Assur, because Bechar is a hybrid. Bechar is Kaddish anyway, because it's the firstborn. But we're going to soon see that you have to declare it's a Bechar as well. So the question is, therefore, does this fall into the category of Davar another, and being matbis on a Bechar would result in another or not? So Zokta Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda would hold that a Bechar is not a Davar another, it's a Davar Assur. Umanda Assur, and the Mandama who held it is a good neder, meaning Rabbi Yaakov says, Omer Kral Lashem, it says, Iski Yida Neder Lashem, the Lashem is Marba, even this Shvacha type of Davar another, even the Bechar, which really is Kaddish without you making it Kaddish, even that's considered a Davar another, L'Rabbi's Davar Assur. So it doesn't literally mean L'Rabbi's Davar Assur, because even Rabbi Yaakov agrees that if you said Harei Zeh Basar Chazir, that would not work. Everybody holds being matmas from the Davar Assur doesn't work. From Lashem, he's learning that this Davar Assur, in other words, Bechar, which is not a real Davar another, that's good enough to be called a Davar another. Uman de Shari, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that you cannot be matmas in a Bechar. Lashem my obidlei. What is he going to learn with the extra word Lashem? So if someone said this piece of meat should be like a chatas, this piece of meat should be like an osham, now a chatas and an osham, it's not completely a davar another either, because you're obligated to bring the chatas, you're obligated to bring the osham. But Lashem tells you that that's considered a davar another. Correct, Gemara, why do you make a distinction between the two? They either should all be considered davar another's, or they should all be considered davar assurs. Uma ros l'rabbi skatas v'osham u'lahoitzias habachar. Zok to Gemara, mar bani chatas v'osham shehu matbis b'neder u'moitzi anis habachar shehu kadosh mimei imoi. A bachar is kadosh mimei imoi. That's we're not going to consider a davar another. We're going to consider that a davar assur according to Rabbi Yehuda. But the chatas and osham, you're matbis b'neder. So what does that mean? So we actually have three different pshatim in what this means. And we'll start with the Ran's pshat. The Ran's pshat is as follows. I'm going to start from the Ran at the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Beis. So the Ran says, "Miboyle lematbis bechatos v'asham." The afal gav the choyva Allah lavian chatos and asham. It's mandatory to bring. So that's not completely a davar another. Nevertheless, mikru davar another. It's considered a davar another. Tvei mi bechor, more than bechor. Maybe. Yes, I have to bring a carbon, but there's no specific animal that I have to bring. I'm the one who ultimately puts the kedusha on a specific animal to bring. That's called a davar another. A bechor, the animal itself, is kadosh as soon as it's born. You can't switch it up. So therefore, it's mistaber to say that chatas and osham would be considered a davar hanother because you're selecting the animal mashenkin abachar. Behind you, the cover besamach shumat pisan beneder. That's what our Gemara means over here. Chatas noshim mimatbis beneder. You select which animal should be the chatas. You select which animal should be the osham. You're not doing that by bechor. That is the shita of the Ran. Tosfos actually has a much simpler understanding, and he says. Mar bani chatas v'osham shumatmas b'neder, af al gav shu chayav oisan v'loy neder. Even though you're chayav to bring a chatas or an osham because of an aver that you did, even without you making a neder, mikol makom ein kedusha chal alein memela. The kedusha doesn't go on those animals automatically. You have to place the kedusha on them. But a bechor is born with its own kedusha. That's the second heritage. Now the third pshat is the Rambam, which is a little bit more innovative. The Rambam says that a bechor, you could never make a bechor. You could never bring upon yourself a chiyuv for bechor. You have to have a bechor born to you. But a chatas and a osham, you could bring upon yourself. How? If you make yourself into a nazir, then at the end of the nazirs, you'll have to bring a chatas and osham. So since there's a possible way for you to bring that upon yourself, Therefore, we consider the Chatnas and the Osham a davar another.
You do a virus, I lose it to a name.
I'm sorry?
I lose it to a name.
Right. So it's a davar another.
You found yourself if somebody doesn't arrive.
Yeah, in a chalami. It means bring it upon yourself through another. That's right. But it's not true. You can't do an avodah. It doesn't help because you have to do a very b'shoigi. You cannot do a very b'shoigi on purpose. Right? Right. That's what the Gemara said. That the Gemara said that the Yidden wanted to bring a chatos. They couldn't bring a chatos. Why? Sheheina Kadosh Baruch Hu maybe takol al yidayim. Why did the Gemara stick that in? Because if it was amazing, they can go do it. The problem is they couldn't do it by mistake because the Irish had to let them make mistakes. So they had no choice. They had to do it through the zeros. You could pull off here. Okay. That's the Gemara. Okay, so now let's just quickly see. Let's go through the end of the Gemara. So now the Gemara wants to Umanda Osar, and who the Manda will hold that it is a good nether. It's with Bechor Nami Matpisa ben nether. Bechor, you also have to be Matpis ben nether. You have to say that Hareza Bechor, the Matpis ben nether. Who the Tanya we learned Mishum Rabbi Amru Minayin Noilad Bechor B'Soich Beisai. How do you know that if you have a Bechor born in your household, Shem Mitzvah Laktishoy, there's a special mitzvah to designate it as a carbon? Shenemar Hazochar Taktish. Uman de Shari, and the Mandam holds it to mutter, says, you're right, there's a mitzvah to declare it as Kodesh. But Kiloi Maktishlei, Miloi Mikdish, even if you didn't say Hareza Kodesh, it's going to be Kodesh anyway. So the way the Achronim will learn is that there's the Kedusha that's on it naturally because it was born. And could be there's an added Kedusha that you have to put on it when you make it Kodesh as well. But at the end of the day, that's the question whether, since it has a Kedusha, even if I'm not Makdish it, is it considered a Dover Hanadar or is it considered a Dover Haser? Which means that after this blood and a half, we did not come to the Maskana of Rami Bacham Shraila. So do you say when I'm Matbis, Basar Shlomim, after Zrika, am I focused on the Makar or not? So the Ran always resides in Halacha. So the very last of the four wide lines at the top. Well, in Halacha, Kosav Ramban Zalbil. Then he debayin Hachaloyev Shita, even though we were not Poshu the Shailam, Ibe Ikri Kamatvis, Oiba Ter Kamatvis, Naktinon, we pass in Halacha Lamaisa, the Beter Kamatvis, that in this case, where he has a Basar Shlomim, he goes Basar Hashta. So he brings a rye from a Gemara. So there is a discussion, is why would we go Lakula if it's a Suffolk Isser? So the answer that's not Lakula. We're pasking the Maskana that the Hashta Kamatvis, and there are certain cases where the Hashta it's Assur and the Makar is Mutter. So we're pasking you go Basar Hashta, Bein L'chumra and Bein Lakula. So that's how the Ran first was. The Ran is referring to a Gemara later. I don't want to get into it. It's when you had a chain reaction. Someone said Amanozer, and then someone said after him Vani, and another guy said Vani, Vani, Vani. So the question is everyone saying Vani on the first guy, or is everyone saying Vani on the guy before him? And if one guy in the middle was Matir, how the fallout works. But I don't want to get into that because we have a lot of Gemara to do. Zok to Gemara Viter. Now we're going to tackle the last set. Remember, there were three sets of cases in the Mishnah. There was the first set where you needed to come on to Mechlalav Shemehein, Loy Chulin Masha Oichalach, where we said it's not going according to Rav Meir, it's going according to Rav Yehuda. Then we had the second set of things where you said Pigel Noiser, which are Dvarim that are Be'etzem Assur. And the Gemara learned that it means Pigel Noiser of a Carbon even. Those are Assur even at a Chafadimin. And then there was the final list of items, Ke'ema, like a deer, like a sheep, Kedirim, like a pen, that the sheep are in, Yerushalayim, Mizbech. And all those, according to Rabbi Yehuda, which our Mishnah is following, needs a chafadim. So Tana we learned Imra, Li-Imra, Ki-Imra, any one of these expressions, or Dirim, Li-Dirim, Ki-Dirim, or Eitzim, La-Eitzim, Ka-Eitzim, or Ishim, La-Ishim, Ki-Ishim, or Mizbeach, La-Mizbeach, Ki-Mizbeach, or Heichal, La-Heichal, Ke-Heichal, or Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Ki-Yerushalayim, Kulon sha'oichalach Assur. In all of these expressions, if you finished with sha'oichalach, so Yerushalayim she'oichalach Assur, that would be a good expression of a neder. Clearly, this will not be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda, who holds in all these cases you need a chafadimian. And here, the Brisa clearly says you don't need it. What if he finished off by saying loy oichalach, kechulin loy oichalach? That would be mutter. So Zoktim man shemin alei. I'm sorry. If I say that it should be like a carbon, what I'm eating, I'm saying I'm making a regular layer. So Zoktim Gemara man shemin alei the loshani le imra le imra ke imra. Who is the Tana who holds that there's no difference between whether there's a chafadimin or not? Rameri, because Rabbi Yehuda clearly argued on that. So if that's the case, Ema Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. V'chulam loy oichalach mutter. If I said Yerushalayim loy oichalach, it would be mutter. But the problem is, Ratnan we learned likarban loy oichalach. If someone said likarban loy oichalach, Reb Meir Oiser. And why did Reb Meir Assur? We don't say michlal lav ata shemei hein. We don't say loy carbon loy oichalach. What I'm not eating won't be a carbon, but what I am eating will be a carbon. You don't say that according to Reb Meir, because according to Reb Meir, you don't say michlal lav ata shemei hein. Rather, we learn everything from the Tanai couple of Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruben. So Zok to Gemara, Rab Abba explained that here you can decipher and interpret this clause as Assur without using the mechanism of michlal lav ata shemei hein, because it's nasik omer le carbon yehei. It should be a carbon. So all of these expressions you can interpret that way. Ishim lo. It should be like Ishim, and therefore lo. I'm not allowed to eat it. So oibazoi. Why does it say lo is mutter? Reb Meir holds that you could interpret and decipher the words as meaning Assur. Hadamar lo imra. Hadamar le imra. It really depends on your pronunciation. If you said lo imra or lo imra, it's a question of the girsa, then you're saying lo imra. It shouldn't be a carbon. that wouldn't lead to Assur. But if I said le imra, if I said it should be like a carbon, then you will explain it as lo oichalach, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it. So the devil is in the details as to how it's expressed. Zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Ha'omer carbon oila mincha chatos toida shlomim shani oichalach Assur. So this is what the Ran was referring to earlier. If I said carbon chatos, right? I didn't speak out before Zrika. Or if I said shlomim, I didn't speak out before Zrika. So the Ran brings a raya that when you say carbon stam, for sure we decipher it as meaning before the Zrika. The whole shaila of Rabbi Bar Chama was when you had an actual piece of meat that was already post Zrika. But when you just say stam, it should be like a carbon shlomim. Your obvious intent is the shlomim when it's still a davar another where it's still Assur. So someone said carbon oila mincha chatas toida shlomim shani oichalach Assur. That is a good lashon of Assur. Let's have a look at the Ran. Ha'omer carbon oila shani oichalach Assur. The avagav deloy amar behu chafadimian. Even though he didn't say the chafadimian, it should be ki oila or ki mincha. Rabbi Yehuda mater. Rabbi Yehuda would hold its mutter. Like our mission of Yehuda mater, because Rabbi Yehuda holds you need the chafadimian. It's like a daida chamina. The Gemara thinks here. The kivan dahani shmon moir al yisurim. Since all of these items, their name tells us that they're Assur. Maybe lahava kapigol noisar the moide behu Rabbi Yehuda like boichal. Maybe they should be not like category C, but like category B in the earlier Mishnah, in the previous Mishnah, where you don't need a chavadimian. Kamash Malon, Chamoshe Parashi Lamaila, Kamash Malon, the Ran is advertising for himself in his last shtickle that when the word be'etzem means Assur, pigel, then you don't need the chavadimian. But carbon, the word itself doesn't mean Assur, and therefore you need a chavadimian. What about ha-carbon, ki-carbon, carbon, sha'oichalach, Assur? That will be Assur. Li-carbon, lo-oichalach, only Reb Meir Oiser, and we've already had an explanation from Reb Abba on this line of the Mishnah several times. Can you say that again?
The three individual cases,
Right.
why are they important?
Because here it says sha'oichalach, not shani oichalach. So let's see the Ran to explain the difference. Ha carbon, ki carbon, carbon sha'oichalach, Assur. Exactly the case that Dovi is focused on. The bechol lishni mashma, the masha yoichal yeh carbon. No matter how you explain it, what you're saying is what you're planning to eat should be also like a carbon. The dafka ki amar she'oichel. That's only if he said she'oichel. Aval amar carbon loy oichelach. If he said carbon loy oichelach, surely that would be mutter. That nam beperik sheni, because we're going to learn soon. Carbon loy oichelach mutter. If you said carbon loy oichelach is mutter. Umukmina lach Reb Meir, and we still like Reb Meir, who holds you don't say mechlalav at the shehein at the shemehein. The time of the milsa the chi amar carbon beloy lamed. If he said carbon without the word lamed, mashma the nishba bechaye carbon shaloyachal. It's mashma that he's swearing in the name of a carbon, like I'm swearing in the name of Hashem. You could swear in the name of Hashem, but you can't swear in the name of a carbon, and therefore it has no validity at all. The carbon loyachal. The Parish Begamar, we already learned this. This should be also like a carbon. Therefore, the Amr la carbon Assur. If you would have said the carbon sha'oichalach, it's Assur, because that's the simple meaning. The mash mashaper, the carbon yehei, mash sha'oichal mishalach. Whatever I want to eat from you should be to me like a carbon. Okay, so let's go back there. Katani we learned. And I just want to look at the Bach for a second, because he changes things around a little bit. Let me see where my Bach is. The Bach's here at the bottom. Katani ha carbon, ki carbon, carbon she'oichelach Assur. That's what our Mishnah says. Stama tana kereb Meir. Pashtus, this is like Reb Meir. The loishani lay bein imra leimra. It doesn't make a difference if you said imra or leimra, because either way, it doesn't make a difference. Dr. Rab, Stama Tana Kreb Meir. Who adin the Tana law, Tana Achrina, Kashanami Bryce Amos Nisan. So all the Gemara is doing here, it's not irrelevant who the Gemara is pinning this on. The Gemara is about to ask a kasha on our Mishnah from a Bryce that seems to contradict it. Elakushta v'ikra the milsa kamafarish. It happens to be, we know that our Mishnah is going according to Reb Meir. But regardless, we'll have our kasha anyway. So katani carbon sha'oichalach Assur. Stamatani Reb Meir loishanalei ben imra leimra. Zokta Reb Meir hada katani ha carbon sha'oichalach Assur. If you said ha carbon sha'oichalach is Assur, right? That's one of the cases in our Mishnah. If you said ha carbon sha'oichalach is Assur, but Tanya we learned a different brayso that says moedim chachamim l'Rabbi Yehuda, which means the brayso is saying there's a unanimous decision somewhere. V'omer ha carbon, v'ha oila, v'ha mincha, v'ha chatos, sha'oichalach, shemuter. Why? Shaloi nadar zeh elo b'chaya carbon. The way we define, the way we interpret these words is not that the item that I'm discussing should be like a carbon, should be also like a carbon. Rather, I'm swearing in the life of the carbon. That's not a good expression of a shvua. So that's contradict this brisa, which has a nusach of carbon sha'oichalach. This brisa says that case would be mutter, and our Mishnah says it would be Assur. So we have a contradiction between our Mishnah and this brisa. Zok to Gemara, no problem. Loy kasha, had Omar ha carbon, the had Omar ha carbon. It depends on the devil is in details. It depends on exactly what you said. Zok to Ram, loy kasha, had Omar ha carbon, had Omar ha carbon, claimer. The chiyomar ha carbon, then I'm saying hi lahavi carbon omar. So if I said ha carbon, then what I mean to say is this should be like a carbon, and then it's going to be Assur, which is what our Mishnah says. The brayso that says it's not Assur is speaking where you said ha, separate word, ha carbon, and ha carbon means I'm swearing in the name of a carbon, and that's not a good expression of Isser. So lekash hadam ha carbon, vadam ha carbon. My time, because chaye carbon kamar. When you say ha carbon, you're swearing in the life of a carbon, which is not any valid type of expression. Katani, we learned le carbon lo'oichalach Reb Meir Assur. Right? That was the last case of our Mishnah. We've had this line, the next couple of lines that we're about to learn, we've had already twice in the last couple of days. It says in the Mishnah, le carbon lo'oichalach Reb Meir Assur. Correct Gemara, I v'lesle Reb Meir michlalav ata shemeyahin. Reb Meir doesn't hold up michlalav ata shemeyahin. If he held on chalavat ashmei, and I would say loy carbon, loy oichala. What I'm not eating is not going to be also like a carbon, but chalavat ashmei, and therefore what I am eating will be like a carbon. But Reb Meir doesn't hold to that mechanism. So how could you interpret the carbon loy oichala as Assur? On that, Rabbi explained, this should be like a carbon, therefore I'm not going to eat it. Okay, gewaltig. Zog the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Someone told his friend, I'm answering my mouth from speaking with you. Or yadai oisimach, my hand to do something for you, or ragli, my foot, malechasimach, Assur, it'll be in this. Break the Gemara, how could these Isurim be valid? Or many be learned. There are certain ways where Nedarim are more serious, more chamerdik than Shavuos. And Nedarim is Shavuos. And there are certain ways where Nedarim are more chamer than Shavuos. Chamer b'Nedarim, where do you see a chamer by Nedarim? Shenedarim chalim ala mitzvah kirbeshus. A nether will chal on a mitzvah just like on Rishus. Masha enkein b'Shavuos. Shavuos will not be chal on a mitzvah. Let's see what the Ran says. Shenedarim chalim al davar mitzvah. The Perak Beis. We bring a raya from a posuk. Shavuos chalos al davar she'ein by mamish. Mishum the mitzvah gavrahu. A shavua is not chal on a gavra, on a chefza. It's chal on the person. It's mandating you or prohibiting you from doing something. Shelo yasakin. The iu is by mamish, and in a person there's mamish. Okay, mashen k'midarim the mitzvah chefza who. By a nether, it's the chayvit that's being usher. I'm saying this should be like a carbon to me. If there's nothing there, so actually I'm getting ahead of myself because this round is explained the next tickle of the Gemara. But the first tickle of the Gemara, which says that a shavua is chal on the mitzvah is that nedarim are chal on the mitzvah kibbishus masha inkem b'shavus. The chaymer b'shavus sheshavus chalos. Al davar sheyesh by mamish, v'shein by mamish. Shavuos are chal on things that, side things that you could touch, and side on just on actions. You could swear I'm going to do something or not going to do something. Mashenkim in the darm that could only be chal on something. So the question is, how can I say that I'm not allowed to talk? How can I make a koinim that I'm not allowed to talk? We just said that a nether could only be chal on an object. A nether cannot be chal on an action. So how could my nether prohibit me from speaking? How could my nether prohibit me from doing something? And how could my nether prohibit me from walking somewhere? Rabbi Yehuda, in order to understand our Mishnah, how a nether could be chal and prevent speech, is ba'omer ye Assur pi l'diburi. The Assur is chal on the davar sheyesh b'mamish. This is chal on your mouth. I'm answering my mouth to speak. Or yodai l'masayim, or ragli leluchan. I'm not allowed to have a no from my mouth. What type of a no? The no of the speech that I'll speak to you. That I'm not allowed to have. Or yodai l'masayim, or ragli leluchan. Dekanami, and I'll bring you right to that shot in our Mishnah. The katani pi medaber imach. It's a very unusual expression. What he could have said, like katani shani medaber imach. So from the fact that his expression was pi medaber imach, it illustrates that he's not answering speech. He's putting an Assur on his mouth, and that's something, in fact, that a nether puts chal on.
What does that mean? That I'm answering the hanu of my mouth to speak?
The same way you cannot have a nu from this piece of meat, you can't have a nu from your mouth. You're asking yourself to have a nu from your mouth. Not every hanu from your mouth, the hanu from your mouth that you'll get if you speak to somebody. So let's see the Ran. So the Ran's telling us, not be'omer, you didn't actually say yes or pila dibure, you said koinim pima daber imach, but we interpret it as if you said yes or pila dibure. The ha'amar, because the words that he actually said are not what the Gemara is saying. The words he actually said are what the Mishnah says, and that is koinim pima daber. Mashma the koinim koyadibur. So the simplest understanding of the Mishnah when you read it is that the koinim is on the dibur. Umashmanami de koyapeh. It also has a mashmois that's going on the peh. Hilchach. Therefore, since it can go either way, Even the stam nedarim lahacher, since we normally interpret nedarim in such a way where the nether will be chal, Amina, we say da pekoi. We said that your koidim is referring to your mouth, which would be a valid structure of a nether. Upiv davar sheyesh by mamashu. Udechavasa ba'ashas, and other times in shas where you find the expression of ba'omer upirusha nasik omer. Whenever you find in the shas the shas is speaking where he said A, B, C, it doesn't really mean he actually said that. It means we interpret his words as having said that. Uvidinu davamotzal. Really, the Gemara could have answered, really, the Gemara could have said that the Mishnah is speaking about an Assur d'Rabbanan, and the Kohanim is in fact going on this speech. This that we say that the Nedarim aren't chal on a davar, she'ein by mamish, that's midaraisa, but midarabanan is chal. The Gemara is saying the emes pshat. It'll even be Assur mi dairaisa. So there's a whole question. That the Rashba asks: how could you say that a nether is chal on a mitzvah? Why don't you say also? I say I make myself an Assur to eat this matzah, so the nether is chal on the matzah. I'm not eat the matzah. Why don't you say also? I say v'doy chaloisasa. So this is a big discussion in the Rishonim. So the Rashba answers that every nether is an Assur Asay and a Loisasay, because there's a Loyachal Devoroi, but there's also a Kachala Shoyoitzim Pivyasa. So therefore, since every nether is also an Asay and a Loisasay, therefore it could even be Doicha a mitzvah. But there is a lot of talk around how the Asay and the Loisasay is calling each other. I just want to mention that since today is the yahrzeit of the Chidush Harim's Einikel, and the Chidush Harim was very close to this Einikel because this Einikel lost his parents when he was very young, and even the Chidush Harim died when he was very young. His name was, I think his name was Shmuel Alter, and not the Gerish even on it. Shlomo Alter. He's the Einikel of Chidush Harim. So the Chidush Harim says a very interesting halacha. He explains why is it that you could be matvis on a davar hanoder and not on a davar Assur. Why is it like that? So the Chidush Harim, we know by the story of the Eitz Hadas, it was an avla that Chava told the Nachash that not only may I not eat it, I'm also not allowed to touch it. Right? So the question is, what's wrong? Don't you find everywhere in the Torah that the Torah makes herchekim? It makes the abundance, it makes shemiras. So big deal. She said she's not allowed to touch it. Why was that such a problem that she said that? Zok the Chidush Harim. Of course, you're supposed to have siyagim. Of course, you're supposed to have gzeres. But you have to have clear what's the Assur and what's the gzeres. You can't permish the whole thing. It needs to be crystal clear. If she would have told the Nachash, my husband said that the Torah says the Rebbe said we shouldn't eat it. We want to be extra careful, so we're not even touching it. That would have been appropriate. But to start making your dreamt up Isurim, making them like those are the Rebbe Isurim, that's very wrong, and that will only lead to trouble. And that's precisely why, by Nedarim, you could make a nether to a davar another, meaning you could answer something by being mat with something else that you made Assur. But you can't make something Assur using an issue that your Rebbe made, because you need to have that distinction. You need to know clearly what's really Assur and what's your own chumrah. Okay. So you have to have that demarcation quite clear.
I have a kasha. How many times does the Gemara blab shver if it's an Assur d'Rabbanan or an Assur d'Oraisa? Gemara, that's constantly comes up in the Gemara. Is this midrabanan or is this midraisa?
Right. So the fact that the Gemara works on understanding it shows that distinction is important.
But it often doesn't come to an answer. It's a machlokas.
Sometimes it doesn't know, but I guess it's important enough. No one's ever going to say, what's the difference? There's a huge difference. We have to know what's frumkeit and what's din. Okay, but I hear. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Hadin lach b'lineder, hadin lach kol kinuyay, v'ez Hashem hadin lach kol kinuyay, hadin lach kol kinuyay. We're learning about Dibur, but that is also going to be after them. Okay, zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Be'elu mutarin. What a geschmack pair. This is what's mutter. where everyone knows that a day's tunish, now the town tells us this is mutter. Let's see what we're allowed. If you said this thing should be like chulin, so the Ran says no, that's not pshat. It's only agavarcha that is saying elim mutarim, because that's the focus. But we're still excited with the elim mutarim. So he said chulin shoichalach. The Gemara mafarish l'may yitzrich, because of course what I'm eating is going to be chulin. So of course there's no issue there at all. So I need a mission to tell me that. What if I said kibosar chazir, kavoidus kachavim? Notice these are all devarim harasurim. Kibosar chazir, kavoidus kachavim, ke'oiros levuvin. Oiros levuvin is a type of avodah zarah that is so brutal and disgusting that we would have Pita freaking out if they saw something like this. Let's see the round. Kol mini asurim katani. These are all isurim. Asurim ba'achila, kavasar chazir, v'asurim ba'ano, kavodos kachavim, v'asurim ba'ano, she'ein lam batola. So there's three levels. There's Isra Achila we're talking about, which are chazir. We're talking about Isra Ano, like avodos kachavim. But an avodah zarah, a goy could be mabatal avodah zarah and make it ois avodah zarah. But then there's takrubas avodah zarah, which is aris levuvin, which you could never be mabatal. It remains Assur forever. Aris levuvin. What is this aris levuvin? It was a brutal practice. Show you takrubas avodah kachavim. What did they do? They would take a live animal. Show you noikvim ha'or keneged alei. They would puncture the hide of a live animal right where the heart of the animal was. These monsters would cut the heart out of an animal while it was still alive. And as the krubas avodah zarah, v'chamiri me avodas kachavim, that's even more severe than avodah zarah itself. And he avodas kachavim islay batala. A goy could say, I don't want this getchke to be avodah zarah anymore, and it loses its status of avodah zarah. But the krubas avodas kachavim, an animal that you were makriv, or anything that you were makriv to a avodah zarah, ein levatala, you could never undo it. The tananami shasurim b'achil b'vad, there are some that only Assur. The yeshbem tumah knevelos, then there are some that are Assur, but they have tumah like nevelos. So the Mishnah is listing off various different types of isurim. So V'asar Azir is Assur b'achila, avodas kachavim is Assur b'ano, but you can mevatel it. Aris levuvin are Assur b'ano, you can't be mevatel it. Nevelos have tum involved. Treifos, the Gemara, I think treifos is Agavorcha mentioned. Shkotim Ramoshim, which are tummy in smaller quantities. Then we have this case already. Like chala and truma, those are things that the Ran says, even though you have to call it chala, you have to call it truma, but the Ran told us that the Isser comes by itself. The Isser comes from the Torah, so it's not a davar another. What if someone tells his wife, Hare at alai ki ima, you are also to me like my mother? So the halacha is, technically, that wouldn't be a good nether at all, because his mother is Assur to him, not because davar another, because davar Assur, but we're going to see midrabanan, we force him to be matter that nether, but the Pesach can't be that, oh, it's disrespectful to my mother to Assur my wife to me like my mother. That's disrespectful to my mother, so therefore we find some other Pesach why it should be mutter. And the Ran speaks out that it was very common for men to get angry at their wives and Assur their wives. So that's why we have to be very strict with it. Let's see the Ran. Any issue that someone would Assur his wife. Why did it chap the mother? Because there's an extra chiddush that the Tana is sharing. Not only did you have to be matter nether, but the way your matter is also restricted. And the I'm a oretz midrabon and tzorich Pesach, and I'm a oretz midrabon needs a Pesach. So we're saying, so the Ran's giving us a clue that this Mishnah is only referring to an am ha'oretz. Only an am ha'oretz is forced to be matter such a nether. Vashmin and Su, the tzorich shiyei mimokam acher. The Pesach has to be from something else, not from the mother herself. If I would have known Shaloye covered limcha, that's not covered for your mother, bekach, lo yisanoider, that's not a good Pesach. Lo tema, don't say, Nidei Poshchem lo adam b'chvad ava v'imoi, hanimili bin b'darim daraisa. But in the darim daraisa, there you cannot use the covet of your mother and father to be matter the nether. I will hide the less element rabbanon, but this is only a derabbanon issue because really there's no validity to this nether. Maybe Poshchem kamash malon. And then he says, why? Lesser is ishtoi mitoichak poda. It was normal for people to get upset at their wives. Right away, they would get her with a nether. Vishoris loy, beloy pesach, kimatvis b'davar Assur. If, even though it's not a properly structured nether, so really, they shouldn't need a pesach, but if you would let them walk free and say, don't worry, there's no validity to your nether, also we're afraid this Hamoritz will make a good nether once, and he'll also think that he can ignore it. I will share nedarim, but other types of nedarim, since they're not as common as making a nether to Assur your wife, loy gozru, there is no gezerah, loy gozru ben tzrichin sheila. Behind the nedarim, the ratio, the mesis, the mator, lagam keditza v'gemara. Okay, so those are the different trials. There's some very interesting trials. A guy had two wives, and the guy Assured his wife Banoch for 30 days. And then, after 30 days, he got angry at his second wife. He told the second wife, you should be like her. So the Shiloh says, Bikar Kamatvis? Is he telling you should be like her when I asked her, or she should be like her now? So there's a lot of Shilohs about this type of a tfosa. Gewaltig. Okay, so we'll stop here, and we'll be bamshich tomorrow. Shkoyach. Shkoyach, have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Hey Dave, how are you? Thank you, Yosy.